Hello, Michael. Hi, Michael Smith is on this call with us. Hey, just put questions or comments in the chat as always, and I will read them to our three artists today. So excited to have you all on here. Terry Gardner, Anita Mosier Solich, and Chris Maynard. Without further ado, I am just going to jump right in. And we're going to start with Terry today. Terry, what year is this for you in the show? 12, 13?
This is actually going to be 19.
Oh, time go. Oh my goodness. I'm going to spotlight you for everybody here. Yeah, I have said this before. I'm going to say it again. Former illustrators are some of my favorite artists to work with. I truly, design and color and drawing and all that. But my number one reason, y'all know how to hit a deadline. It's just so amazing as a curator to have artists who hit my deadlines. Anyway, thank you for that once again. So over the years that you have been in the show, and I remember when you started and when we first started talking and your work, you were still working in illustration, you were still art director and really let's face it, this is a great career. You've got a mortgage, you've got triplets, you've got, car payments and all this kind of stuff, right? Art director, fine artist, they really kind of go hand in hand, right?
They do. Yes, they do. And I think part of what I've mentioned in the past when talking about my work and the duplicity of careers with advertising and fine art is that the benefit of advertising is that you always have to have an idea or a concept when you're doing work for large brands or any kind of good marketing, brand building. And I do think that transgressed into my work as well. Is what is the idea? What is the story you're trying to tell with your work? It is not just about replication of a subject, but it's about bringing to life a story or a interpretation that's unique.
So I'll also say the other interesting thing about being in the graphic design world and having a day job in the art business, as it were, is that you actually, I felt two things. One, we're so hungry to just be able to paint for yourself. But two, you had the freedom to experiment.
That is correct.
Yes. And so I think right from the start, when you came into the show, you painted these things that you wanted to try and these ideas that were truly your ideas. No Pepsi or Bounty or anybody was coming to you and saying, this is the ad campaign. This was all Terry. This was all what you wanted to express. And this was all, me saying, hey, it's the Coors Western Art Exhibit and Sale. What do you have to say, Terry? And yeah, it came together, right?
It did, and I think the when you do have you know as well as anyone, Rose, that I studied at the Art Students League with both Kwang Ho and Mark Daly, and Mark was actually one that would be to many people's surprise. He actually was someone that said you benefit from sometimes having that day job, even though so many artists want to be solely full time, because it gives you that opportunity to learn, experiment, and not feel like you are shouldering this burden of sales. So you can kind of, organically get into that fine art full time versus feeling the pressures and committing too early.
Right. See, I think there is so much there that even though you're working all day and your creativity is going, it's also the artists who teach, right? You get that. But then having the freedom, and you can even see that throughout time, the artists who were given the freedom and they had an income from a patron or somebody, right?
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. And I think, it's kind of interesting. I think if I'm talking to an audience that I can't see and whoever's listening today, one of the Emerson once said, imitators doom themselves to hopeless mediocrity. And I think that isn't just about imitating other artists or whatever subjects that are in front of them. Sometimes artists also imitate themselves, meaning that they don't grow and expand over time, because you do get into a situation of, hey, it's worked, why should I fix it, versus the artists that we often look up to and that we see on museum walls are the ones that actually have just transpired from earlier in their career to these, beings that just went somewhere that no one else had gone.
Right, right. And I think too, and I think you sent me a book on art and fear, right? Was that you who sent me?
It's a book by Stephen Pressfield called The War of Art.
The War
And
of
I
Art.
always encourage any artist, doesn't matter if you're a writer, painter, dancer, whatever, it is such a magnificent book. Uh,
Right.
yeah.
And so there is this notion of, when people really talk about creativity, and there's birthing ideas, and there's the war of art, and there's art and fear. And, I think from the outside looking in, it's like, I want to spend all day long just, playing with, crayons or whatever you play with in your studio. But the reality is, to bring these concepts forward, and we're going to do a screen share here, and really look at this new body of work, which has once again taken another leap forward, for you in particular. This is actual work that really kind of can hurt your brain in a way, right?
Yeah, yeah. And, Rose, I think as I've, over the years with the show, I've talked to you privately about how I, at least with every year, try to push myself. And, there's a lot of great artists. Wolf Kahn comes to mind, who always says, if you're not making yourself uncomfortable, then you're doing something wrong. And every year I try to put in a piece that kind of pushes the boundary, so to speak. And the patrons have to be accepting of that as well. For art to move forward, it's not just the artists, it's the recipients that have to embrace that as well. So Boss, for me this year, is the one where I really tried to start pushing kind of those abstract qualities and had a different idea in mind.
You know what? Let's go ahead and on that and share. And I'm going to pull up Boss, and I just need to go to, let me just click back here and see if it pops up here.
There
Right,
it is.
here we go, Boss. And I'm going to expand this just nice and big on the screen. And, and I keep saying this every time, starting to sound like a broken record when we're doing these talks this year, but because we're in person, I just can't say it enough. You have to experience, especially this particular painting, in person. This painting does so many different things. And I want you to talk about this, because this is also another one of those transitional paintings for you. One, it's still really grounded in a representational, and it's grounded in a Western theme. Everything else around it is just abstraction and this gray on gray on gray with the pops of color. And all of it comes together to say Boss. And what is happening sort of a little bit more emotionally with this bowl, instead of just saying, here's a bowl.
Yeah, and I got so I'm going to talk about George Innis for a second here, who may not seem like he has anything to do with this, but I've read a lot about George Innis, and later in his life, he said this one area he was trying to achieve was this subjective and objective world, the known and the unknown. And I think that helps describe this piece. The known is the face and how intense it is, and that look from this cow right in front of you. And when you're experiencing it firsthand, it's pretty powerful. But there's so much of the unknown, and what we need to, as artists, bring in our own personality and the chaos of what happens on a ranch when there's 300 head of cattle around you, and there's dust and all this motion that's going on. So that was what I was trying to do, is kind of pull it out from inside of me of what my experience was at that time, and also not lose the fact that we are actually still in the world of a ranch where there's actually cattle in front of you. So it's a kind of a combination of the known and the unknown.
Well, and this is so, like, this to me is such an exciting thing too, that you're doing with the work, and what you're pulling to the surface is what's under the surface. And so, like, right here you're talking about the known and unknown, you don't need to describe every aspect of this cow's legs and hocks and hooves, and I don't need that, right? My mind's already gone there with you. I'm with you. But look at this, like this gets me excited. Just these little snips of color that when you're standing in front of it, you're not going to go, oh, look at that little red snip of color right there. Why did he do that? What you're seeing is this bull, and you're feeling this confrontation, right? But it's not just the look on the bull. It's all of this play of motion of your brushwork. And when you do use color in this painting, it is really forceful, and it's right on target. And I'm wondering, would you kind of talk about how this came together and what was happening inside the studio and with you when you pulled this piece together?
So trying to think about back to the world of how being in advertising made you think about what it is you're trying to say. So I almost titled this before I started on it. I was like, it's a powerful face. This cow, amongst all the other cattle that were present, just had this look on his face, like I'm the man here. I'm the boss. I'm in charge. And I started with that idea and started thinking about what are the shapes and the strokes and the colors that are going to help bring this to life. So the gray and the black were a very powerful part of it because they're strong. High contrast was also something I was trying to achieve. I reference a lot of abstract work, and I have a board leaning up over here where I printed out images of abstract paintings, because I like to pull from those and insert those qualities, whether they're shapes, colors, edges, and how they treat the canvas, and then again merging that with representational pieces as well. So that's how it kind of came together. It was this merging of perhaps two genres into one painting.
Yeah. I think that's so fascinating that you had it really titled before you even got going on it, which is always seems like the title is something that pulls together at the end, or for some artists is just a throwaway.
And yeah, often I have a hard time coming up with titles. So
Yeah.
this was just a little bit of a unique situation.
So there are two paintings that are 30 inches tall, 24 wide, and they're really kind of companions, I think. And one is, I'm going to back out here so we can see them, but one is this Cowgirl Thoughts, and the other is Cowboy Morning. And when you come see the show hung, they flank Boss on the wall where how I have them hung. I think somebody needs to just buy them all together, because that's how they really they look great together. But there's something also going on, and I kind of wish I could just show the whole wall together, because these three paintings together are so vibrant in color, which is kind of surprising after we just saw Boss.
Yeah, and so the interesting story about the cowgirl thoughts and cowboy mourning. It's very interesting. So Samantha in pink is married to Jake in
Oh,
orange.
ah,
They're husband and wife. They do a lot of these brandings and live together on the Chico Basin Ranch. The interesting piece, I was invited to their wedding in 2020. Shortly after they got married, Jake got deployed to the Middle East. So it's one of those things when I was doing this painting, and he doesn't return until early next year, that I
wow.
was thinking about how it must have been so difficult for her because they worked together and they lived together and experienced life on a daily basis together, that suddenly a couple months after they're married, that
Wow.
then Jake is deployed. So the cowgirl thoughts was, I can only imagine a lot of what she was going through now being on this ranch, an 89,000 acre ranch where it can be very lonely.
Yeah.
and and then and I'm glad you positioned them how you did, Rose, because they should be looking at each other, their
Yeah.
husband and wife.
Yeah. Yeah, and right, and they are, and they're such a companion piece. So that really makes a lot of sense with the color harmonies as well. And it's an interesting thing this year with the show that their bodies of work, I feel like with artists that for the most part, especially you are a great example of this, that the work speaks together. It all seems to be of one, and it's very harmonious together, and yours especially has done that. And sometimes it's with subject matter, but yours in particular, and I'm going to just show this, is there's like a harmony within the palette. Some is really withheld, and then other aspects like the orange in Cowboy Morning and that pinky purpley color in Cowgirl Thoughts pop. But together there's just really a rhythm.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that, because I think one of the things I think about with each painting is that, and it's the rhythm and feeling like the grays, also the muted colors a lot of times can help where you want to have a color or a contrast pop. It's a bit of like what Turner and Constable,
Mm,
how they approach their work, is that the grays can be just as important as the colors, because they help offset each other.
right.
So that's part of the intention. And then of course, the disappearing shapes into one another is also an important part of the work as well.
Mhm. So, okay, Terry, so hang on. I'm gonna click over to, I'm gonna stop the screen share, and I'm gonna pull up Anita Solich's on, and we're gonna talk about your work. And I think it's an interesting segue, because where Terry's color is really pretty tightly held, and when you pop, it's just a real like pow, to Anita's work that is just all color, pop, pop, pop everywhere. And so welcome, Anita. How are you?
Hi, Rose. Thank you. Wonderful.
Good, good. Yeah, so okay, so last year was your first year in the show. We were totally online
Yep.
with the show, and this year we're in person. And so fun to see inside your studio. And yeah, I'm kind of wondering with your work. And so I'm going to do a screen share here, and let's just kind of show a bunch of it. But yeah, let's talk about inspiration.
Okay.
Because did you grow up in the ranching side of things, or in the?
Not ranching, but farming. So I had several relatives that lived on working farms. My aunt and uncle and my cousin, and we would go out there every chance we got. And I just loved riding horses and running around the pasture with the cows and the chickens and pigs and all the animals. So we
Yeah.
lived, I'm from Kansas City, and we lived in the city, but my relatives lived out on these farms. So I always wished I lived out on the farm.
Yeah. So tell us about you, because so art wasn't your first, you didn't study art. Yes. Right.
Well, my mom put me in art classes when I was 6 years old at the Nelson
But I
Museum.
mean, college, let's just jump forward.
College. Yeah. No, right. That's right.
Fast
No,
forward. Yeah.
fast forward.
Yeah.
I studied nursing, and I was an operating room nurse. So
Yeah.
that was I love anatomy and physiology and what's under the skin inside the body. And so that was, I mean, I didn't realize you could make a living at art. That was not anything that was in my realm of possibility.
And so when did art come back into your realm?
When I was about 30,
Mhm.
I started taking some painting classes again, and then took about 6 years of classes with all different, my favorite artists. Anybody I really admired their work, and just started, out slow. My friends started wanting to buy paintings, and I started entering shows, and it kind of just happened organically that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk chicken. Let's talk chickens. Talk about your inspiration for these. And so in a fun comparison, Terry with the, really, the brushwork is really creating a lot of drama in his, and then just the punch of, and yours is really a lot of color and a lot of motion happening in these in a really different way. So talk about that, and talk about how, why chickens?
I love the interplay of the feathers, and I love to imagine these birds having personalities and given human qualities. And I make up little stories in my head about, what they're doing and what they're communicating about. And I just think their movements and walk and are just so fascinating. So I've always been enchanted with roosters and chickens, and they're such an iconic image.
And
and
where
they're
do
so important to our life.
and where do these come from? Where do you get your subject matter?
I get it, honestly, wherever I find it, but a lot of these, like these guys, the rooster on the left is from the island of Kauai, and on Kii Beach. And if anybody's ever been there, Hurricane Iniki blew open a bunch of all the chicken coops, and the roosters and the chickens are running around all over the place on the beaches, the stop sign, on the road, and the grocery store parking lot. They're everywhere. So I take pictures of them, and like where with cars in the background, or on the beach. They get them on the beach, wherever I find them. I've taken pictures of roosters. I have friends in Russell, Kansas, and Hayes, Kansas, and around. So I get a lot of, when I drive back, I stop and take pictures at my friends' places. And
Fun.
Yeah.
Fun. And then you just kind of put them together, or when does inspiration strike, and what comes together to get you to create?
The lighting and the position. I do have to change the feet or things sometimes, but mostly what inspires me is a certain cock of the head or lift of the foot, or the way the tail feathers are blowing in the ocean breeze, or whatever it is. That's what catches my eye and inspires me.
Yeah. Wow. Fun. So let me see. Tell us a little bit about Poncho.
So Poncho he was a rooster on the beach. So I tried to kind of convey the idea of the sand on there and a little bit of the ocean in the background. And I just thought it was such a beautiful contrast to the color with his feathers.
Yeah.
You know, I pull out different tools to make the different marks, and my pieces are pretty textural. I really enjoy the texture of oil paint, and I love, putting down thick, juicy brush strokes or palette knife strokes, and so that I played with that a lot in that piece.
Yeah. Okay. And so the Duke, yeah, he kind of does look like he's large and in charge.
Yes, yeah. And like Terry mentioned, some of my names come to me before I start painting, and then some I really struggle with, and it's harder to come up with a name. But this guy, when I decided to paint him, I thought he looks like a Duke. He reminds me of a Duke. So he was easy to name.
Yeah. Yeah.
And again, I love the way the feathers, all the different movement of the feathers, and the layers of paint that I use to get that movement, the feel of that.
Yeah, yeah. So I'm going to stop the share, and then and I'm going to switch over to Chris. But what are you working on next? What's next up to bat for you?
I've got a show at Settlers West down in Tucson. So I'm going to be painting it's the American Miniature Show. So I'm working on a couple small pieces for that show.
Great. Good. Okay. Stay put. Chris Maynard, out on the Pacific, in the Pacific Northwest. Thank you for rushing back to your studio.
You're welcome. Sorry for getting the time wrong.
I know. Oh my gosh.
Time zones.
Yes. You're okay. You know what? Let's just say you're an artist, and
No. Some of us are on time, like Terry.
Terry, yeah, right. Terry is on time. Okay, I'm giving you a hard time. I always love talking to Chris. And I remember when I first saw your work, it was up at Visions West in Montana. And did I ever tell you the story? So I walked in, I was talking to the owners of the gallery I love, and we were just having a conversation about business and whatever, and I kept looking over their shoulders, and finally they said, just go look at, that's Chris Maynard. And I'm like, what is it? What am I seeing? And they're like, just go look. And it's feathers. Like it was just so, my brain couldn't put it together. And, and when you look at a lot of art, it's like, and you're tripped up by something, I was just so blown away that I had to track you down. And they were so sweet that gave me all your contact info. And so it's been just so much fun to be able to talk to you about your work. But I wonder if you have a TED Talk about why feathers. And would you just kind of give us a little bit about why feathers?
I have a short answer, which is I want to fly and I can't. That's my short answer, and people get it.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah, because feathers, because we want to do that, and we have these aspirations of being here but wanting to get there. Feathers and birds can symbolize that for us all over the world, all cultures. So that's one reason. Another reason is that feathers are beautiful, and they're kind of gifts from the birds because they're complex and they are shed once a year, more or less. And we can use those feathers and have them, and I can use some of them, the ones that are legal to use in my art. Yeah. And I come away with an ability to already have some of the essence of what I want to portray, because almost all of my work is about birds. Yeah.
So I'm not going to tell people or ask you to tell people how you do this, because I don't don't know that they need to know. I mean, yeah, everybody wants to know, right? But I mean, I think that, like, there's something happening here that's so far beyond how you do this. And that is like, you are telling stories. And so on the surface, you've got a feather. And so what you can see in this one, and let me kind of expand this out, is you see all of these animals, and this shadow here, that's not painted. That's the light hitting it and casting a shadow. And so these are essentially paintings, but they're three-dimensional. And so Chris is working with positive and negative space to tell a story. Would you please talk about this image, but would you also talk about how did this develop in your mind?
Okay, well, generally about how this kind of process developed in my mind is I wanted to respect the feathers and the birds and let people, like you saw, Rose, in that gallery in Montana, you're seeing feathers in a new way, in a different way that you'd never seen them before. So you look twice at them. And so I wanted to keep the feathers, the featherness of these feathers, and not paste them to the background. And so I raised them above the background so we get shadows. This piece is, if it has to do with birds, it also might have to do with us a lot too. And a lot of my work is about flight, but some of it's about what birds eat.
Yeah.
And there's a heron that comes into the field near my house, and it eats mice. It just stays all afternoon and finds mice, which I never thought of herons doing, but that's a big part of their diet, I guess. So
Wow.
I'm just thinking about what they eat and how, what might be kind of in their mind as far as how they see the world. This is my imagination working on about, what these birds are surrounded by, and they're thinking about the mice and where they live and the frogs and the fish, everything that they eat.
Mm.
And
And
that's kind
so
of their world.
yeah, well, yeah. And just yeah, everything about their world, right? Heron's Kitchen. And so, oh, that's wonderful. So this is almost, you hear landscape painters say, oh, I just walked out my back door and painted. And essentially you kind of walked out your back door and painted too.
Yeah, yeah. And this feather is from a African crowned crane.
Oh,
Nice big flat feather. And I have a friend that lives 15 miles away that raises them.
oh,
And so these feathers, he gives me some shed feathers once in a while, and these birds I know are still alive.
oh, wow. Does the feather trigger a concept, or do you, how does it come? Or do you just have a concept and this is a great feather to pull that to life?
So what's the inspiration?
Yeah.
So lots of different ways. Sometimes I just sit and I hold a feather in my hand and twirl it around and let it fall down and float down and just get in this space of almost a trance, and then things come to me like that. I have this experience with the birds.
Oh,
Sometimes there's a theme, like this is probably a little bit of a idea of a theme of what birds eat and food, which is big in my life because I eat too.
yeah.
And a combination of that and just watching the bird.
Mhm. Mhm.
Other artists also inspire me too. My mother was a professional artist. So some of her work has inspired me.
So in what way did we were actually, this was so interesting because in last night's conversation, Willie Matthews said his mother was really important to him. and taught him the basics when he was a kid. And she painted her whole life. Scott Fraser said his parents as well were very supportive, and took him to museums and really introduced him and encouraged him. And Barbara Van Cleve, photographer, said that her dad really taught her to see out on the ranch and gave her her first camera when she was 11. And then they would ride. And he would say, look at that, look at that, look how the sun hits that, look at how the cattle do that. And he taught her to see. How did your mother, what was that your mother brought to you?
She was a professor, and then our professor, and then she got married and wasn't a professor anymore. But she had her practice and she had her own studio, and she had a little following of people she'd teach.
Oh.
I think just by osmosis, and the specifics aren't, I mean, she's always saying, oh, look at those colors, and always looking at things with an artist eye. It just rubbed off on me. And plus all her art history books she had, and I always read those.
Oh. So, okay. This one, when you were saying sometimes the feather and you twirl the feather around, this one, everyone who walks up to your work, they kind of go past it and then they're like, wait a second. And they come back and you see them just get right in there. They're like nose almost against the glass. I feel like the feather brought this one out, but tell us about this piece.
Okay, this one I wasn't sure I was going to send it to you because, so I'm working on a second book, and the person who's helping me with it flew out from Washington, DC, and it's a woman who's kind of all dressed up. She had red lipstick on, and I have hummingbird feeders outside. So I was inside my studio, and she came running in. She said, there was a hummingbird. It just was right next to my lips. It was just kept hovering there, because hummingbirds like flowers, they like red color. And so I thought about that, and I looked for a feather that had a little bit of just a little bit of red that I could use for the lips.
Wow.
And I only found two different kinds of feathers that would do that. One is the Amazon parrot, which was the first one I did. It was my study. And then I found a bigger one, a red-tailed black cockatoo, and made a bigger piece. And then I put it, do you know Gerald Peters Gallery?
Yeah.
I was going to send this big one down to them, and she said, well, maybe it kind of looks like it looks like blackface. A little bit, where white people would dress up and put makeup on and make fun of black people.
Yeah.
And it just happened that these feathers were jet black. They're the only feathers that have a red, and so it's totally not my intention. But so afterwards, fairly recently, I put it out there, and I was asking people about it, and most people just liked the piece. And I asked some people, some black folks, about it, and everybody said, well, I really like it. It doesn't bother me. And then I sent a picture up to a well-known black activist artist, and he sent me some pictures of blackface, which didn't really look like the one I sent you, but looked like this other one that I have right here. And I have it right here. I brought it just to.
I'll stop the screen share so we can see it. Yeah. Yeah.
So that looks a little bit more.
Yeah.
And these are big feathers.
Yeah.
So that's my a take on that, and I don't know what you want to do with it now. The show.
You know what? I have to say, and I would almost ask you, did you lead with, when you sent it to the black artist, with that question, does this remind you of, or did you say, hey, I just would love to get your thoughts on this? And then he responded, well, this feels like, because I never once thought that. And I thought, I mean, to me, it just looked like you're using a feather and the lips attracted the hummingbird.
Yeah, that's the intent.
I never.
And I exaggerated the lips a little bit, because that's what you do if you want to focus your attention somewhere, as an artist. So
Yeah.
No, I led with, I don't want to offend anybody.
Yeah. Yeah.
That kind of
Well,
thing.
did he say he would be offended by it?
He sent me a picture of a guy with a black face
Yeah.
that looked kind of like it. So,
Huh. But he didn't say whether yay or nay.
but he didn't say, well, I'll have to go back and look.
Yeah.
But he said, there's a connection. People can make a connection.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, how about when we get to the end of this talk, it'd be interesting to hear Terry and Anita, because
Good
I
idea.
didn't make that connection at all. I just made a connection that as it unfolded for me, and I'm going to call it back up again, as it unfolded, it was the hummingbird at a feeder. And then I'm like, oh my God, the hummingbird attracted to the red lips. And I kind of took it to be more of maybe even just like telling a secret, back and forth kind of thing. I took it more metaphorically than to be, you used a model and a real hummingbird and I don't know. I actually, you know what? Terry, Anita, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting. I didn't go there as well, Rose. That's not where I went. I kind of went being familiar with hummingbirds, that they are attracted to color. So if I have something bright on and I walk from my studio to the house, sometimes they come up real close to you and then they take off because they see that color. However, I am not the, person that would be probably the best to ask, as I'm not the, the one that potentially would be offended, but I didn't go there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Anita,
I have hummingbird feeders in my yard, and like Terry, when I wear something colorful, they come out and they're on me sometimes, or I've got a lot of pots of flowers. And when I'm out there working in the pots, they're, right on me as I'm pruning flowers and things. And I guess when I first saw that, I thought it reminded me kind of that old silhouette art form, where the face and the figures cut out in black on a lighter background. So I didn't go there immediately. I know that, maybe the narrative out there might lead towards that, but that's not where I went at first. I just saw it as a beautiful piece.
Mm-hmm.
It is a beautiful piece and it has a great story, Chris. And that sometimes is a difficult thing as artists when the patrons and viewers do not actually have the ability to hear the story behind it. But it's a great piece and it's a great story.
Yeah. Michael Smith listening in writes, I immediately saw it as blackface. I wonder how our different backgrounds would lead. So I actually thought, wow, you're representing a Black woman with lips. I didn't see it that way, but that is interesting though. But, people do bring their own stuff to every work of art, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, I want to click over and look at some more of your images but I will tell you that is one that draws people in. And I've not had anybody say a negative thing about it. They're like, oh my God, that's incredible. And they make their own stories about it. So, I think okay. I'm going to let you know throughout the show how that one goes. So reflection study, this I'm going to tell you is one of my favorites this year. Certainly of yours in the show. And just how you visualize this. And I think this one is such a fascinating piece in that, you've got this wonderful part of the feather that is just creating this beautiful soft entrance into it. And then you've got this maybe a moon background, and then the bird dipping its beak into the water and then reflecting over it, and how it's sprawled and holding on. And I just think this one is just so magical in a way, like that you just kind of create this whole scenario, and the reflection and the ripple of the water. And I don't see Chris anymore, so I don't know. Are you there, Chris? I wonder if we lost our connection. I'm going to stop the share for a second and see if I lost Chris. It looks like I lost Chris. I'm sure he'll be back. But okay, so we'll keep an eye out for Chris to come back. And you know what? Let me just read. Michael, you brought up a good question here. It'd be interesting to hear thoughts on the issue of naming artwork. Does it matter what they use to select a name and when to select it, and what they think of Untitled? So while we wait for Chris to come back, what are your thoughts on naming artwork? Because it is really, I don't know. I've actually had artists say, well, what do you think? I'm like, no, that's not happening. What do you think about that, naming artwork?
Well, I think it's,
Go ahead, Anita.
I think it's very important. I think that many times the title of the piece either really resonates with the collector or doesn't. And I think the times that it does, it really helps sell the piece, because that either connects emotionally with the collector or reminds them of, something from their childhood or they really relate to. And I think I've had many incidences where somebody's interested in a piece and I'm talking to them about the piece, and then I tell them the name of the piece and they're like, oh, we're buying it. We want this one. And I think it can be very descriptive, and sometimes it can really point out some little detail in the piece that maybe the viewer didn't see. It's not right in your face, that they really appreciate. And like we've all talked about, sometimes it's really easy to name a piece and the title comes to you before you start painting, just when you get the idea. And sometimes it's a struggle.
Yeah. So, okay, Chris is back. So I'm going to click back to Chris really quick. And yeah, and you know what? So Michael did add a comment to this past piece we were just talking about, the discussion points on how important it is to the viewer is a dialogue with the artist to have that. It's even more critical for an informed buyer. And you know what, I really agree in these conversations. I think that's why these conversations are so wonderful to have, right?
Yeah, definitely.
So Chris, let's go. I'm going to go back to the screen share, because I was talking about this piece that that I was just saying before we lost you is one of my favorite of your body of work this year, and it's the reflection study. And I was just talking about this piece. It is it's one of the more quiet ones that you sent in this time. And it is this beautiful, like, I'm in my mind, I'm seeing it as a moonlit scene of a bird dipping its beak into the water and the ripple of the water and the reflection of it coming back up. And it kind of calls to for me, sort of mythology, and which to me, like, I think your work always goes to another level because of the way you think and the way you see, which is so unique. But I'm wondering if you would tell me about this piece, and not just the inspiration, but if you would kind of talk about maybe a little bit more about how you saw this in your mind's eye.
I think it's been a time of reflection this last few years for a lot of people. And really, I mean, we're inside or we're isolated more.
Mhm.
And I've just thought about reflection. I'm just reflecting on my life and reflecting on just not just my life, but what's it all about?
Yeah. Yeah. And it's interesting, the vehicle, I mean, birds and feathers, obviously, but I mean, to have this really quiet, sensitive piece, and then the bird like really hanging on to the reeds on the side. Um, I don't know, this piece really struck me this year for some reason.
And well, this one in part, just watching these birds and the way they can flit around and are able to like put their legs straight out and grab a piece of grass on one side and a piece of grass on the other side. And they're so mobile.
And I think your work, in such a really intriguing way, is there's so much observation to it. And not that Terry and Anita aren't observing their surroundings. But also when you're working in oil on a canvas or, these other mediums, you really have a lot of room to think through with a brush in your hand. You, on the other hand, and I would love for you to talk about this, it seems like there's a lot, you've got to have this really composed and thought out before you slice in, right?
Right, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Now I'll have an idea and I'll draw it out and then I'll refine it and then put it on the computer, refine it some more and take a picture of the feather and size that on the computer to my drawing so that I can have a template for cutting. I don't just carve the feather without all that preparation. And the feathers are prepared. But they're also my only size.
Yeah.
And they're my only shape and my only color. So my work often isn't much about color because I have a very limited palette.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. But then, so it's interesting too, because there's the additive process and the reductive process, and yours is the reductive process. And so like a sculptor who's working in stone and you start carving into it and all of a sudden a vein comes through. How do you use that vein in your work? And this one here, when we zero in on this heron flying in and how you were able to use the feathers jutting out and that, the markings that way, that in a sense, it just adds this sense of speed and flight to the heron swooping in.
And then when I like the sense of movement. It's very important in my work. Partly because I'm a kinesthetic kind of person and I like to dance and I experience the world through movement. But then again, the feathers are my only shape and size. And so I have to be really, a lot of the process of making these is how does it fit? How do I design it and space it? It's all about space and relationship. In order to have a unity of design that is pleasing.
Right. Let me pull up this next one here. And this one is using that gorgeous Amazon parrot again, in kind of playing with more, I'm wondering, more of a metaphor maybe on this one?
So this is a combination of inspiration by seeing these marsh wrens, which are little wrens that live in cattails, which you hardly ever see because you hear them rustling around, but you never see them hardly. And then looking at this feather and going, oh, that red on that feather is kind of the shape of a cattail.
Oh, yeah. Oh, wow.
And yeah.
Let's talk about, I remember last time when we talked and I'm going to stop the screen share here so people can see behind you, but dance is a big thing for you and you have this dance floor behind you.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mobile, I can take it down or put it up.
So you talk about that. Talk about, and is that something about being in your body and being active in your body that brings the art to life?
So remember your question about why do I do this? Because
Yeah.
I want to fly and I can't. It's a really a feeling of a kinesthetic feeling in my body.
Mm.
And I see these birds swooping and I feel that in my body. I can't do it, but I feel it. And I feel that I feel the gravity when they hit the bottom, and I feel the lightness when they hit the top.
Wow.
So and I skied for all my life, and I love that little feeling of lightness when you go over a bump. It doesn't last very long. And so I can kind of capture that at a lot less expense and not having to travel ski areas, by dancing and some free form dancing, but also dancing, couple dancing.
Wow. Wow. Okay, I'm going to remove the spotlight and I'm going to put us all in the gallery view again. And we are bumping up against the top of the hour. And so what I love to do, how I love to end these conversations, is to open the mics to the three of you and ask if you have questions or comments for each other. And, please do chime in and ask away.
Well, I'm going to start. I really, up to Anita and Chris, I'm curious about the sketching or drawings that may lead to your finished pieces. Do you guys engage in that? It's part of the process. How does the work unfold?
I'm waiting for Anita.
Okay. Okay, I'll go first. I have a sketchbook and I do a lot of rough sketches in pencil, just little thumbnail size, to try to get my composition. And especially if I'm combining birds from different photos, and just to get the movement and the flow and tell the story. And then I will sketch on the canvas in paint, real lightly ahead of time to make sure everything's in proportion. But yes, I definitely use sketching. Absolutely.
And Chris was just saying that about, your sketching process, right?
Yeah, likewise. I have a notebook and I have a fine ballpoint pen that I just put down my ideas, and they're very scratchy, and I'll go to that. I might have 20 ideas in an hour, and I'll go to that and pick and choose if I looking for an idea. But usually I have an idea and I just sketch it right there and I start on it.
I want to ask something of the three of you, because Chris, you brought it up, is this motion and that you dance. And I get a sense that you feel your art in your body. Art is a physical process, right? And I'm wondering, the three of you, to what extent do you feel the art in your body? Terry, what about you?
Well, I don't know. I think the connection, it's funny. I was just looking at this. Someone had said, do not let a hair's breadth come between you and the subject. And I think that I get very deep in terms of what it is I'm trying to say and what it is I'm trying to bring to life in the actual subject. And describing that as far as in my body might be a little bit more difficult, but I do think eliminating any of the interference or things that might get in the way between you and the subject is really important to me. It's like, what is it I'm trying to say? What is it that cowgirl's experience, or that, that cowboy looking out at the horizon? And those things are really important to me, getting deep into what you're trying to say versus maybe describing it as what my body feels, but it's more of like what I'm spiritually, or what my soul is trying to bring to the canvas.
So maybe a more of pulling the physical out of it and allowing the, for lack of a better word, spiritual part to take over and move the canvas forward.
Yeah, I take that to every piece I go. I would, I think if people are going to buy work, I hope that when they buy work, whatever piece it is, that they feel like that artist put their invested their soul into that piece, and you can really see the artist in the work as much as the subject.
So Chris, let me ask you then, is that something that, because you're so connected to your physical motion, and this feeling of flight, right? Is that a must? Is that an integral part of the manifestation of the work?
Gosh, that's a hard question. I think so. I think so. I mean, but the spirit is there, but it's all connected.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. What, Anita, any comments on that, or any comments you want to add otherwise too?
I feel like one of my favorite things to do is to hike. And so my best days are when I get to go out and hike and be in nature and see nature and the smells, the sights, everything. And so I also stand when I paint typically. And one of my instructors years ago said painting was an exercise class. And so he was always trying to get us to always walk back and look at our work from far away and then come up and paint and then walk back. And so I feel like the physicality of moving while I'm painting is comes into play. I don't know if I relate to it the way Chris does with the
Yeah.
dancing, but and I do when I'm out hiking, I collect feathers, I collect bones, I found skulls of like birds, seagulls, different things. So I collect all that, bring it back to the studio and have it around.
So Michael Smith writes, for years I've worried about my sense that when buying a work of art, I'm taking a piece of the artist's soul. I would say this, that, and why I love doing these talks with artists is because you are actually buying a little piece of the artist and you're bringing the artist home with you in a way. It's something that when you connect with it, the artist is able to share a conversation with you and you get to live with that. And so like people say, oh, buy what you love. And I'm always like, love the artist, like get to know the artist and why they're doing it, because that's what you're living with, really, in my mind.
And I would agree with Michael that it is a little bit of my soul that goes in there, but I think my soul is probably limitless, and I'm very happy to share it. It's partly why I do art.
Yeah, perfectly said. Thank you. Well, we are actually over the hour. So I want to thank you, Terry, Anita, and Chris for making the time this afternoon to be here on this call. And I want to wish you a very safe and wonderful holiday. And hopefully I will see you in January for our opening. January 3rd is our preview and the 4th is our gala opening and our red carpet. So hopefully we'll all be here and we'll be safe. And just please take good care of yourselves and have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, Rose.
Yeah, thank you, Rose. And Merry Christmas and Happy New Year to everybody.
Thank you for doing everything you do, Rose.
Oh my gosh.
And it was great to see the other artists here, Terry and Anita.
Likewise.
All right, you all take care, be good, because Santa doesn't come unless you're good. So thank you all. Good to see you. Take care.
You too. Bye-bye.